Hello and welcome to WTO Forum. Today's question, trade and climate change. What role does the WTO and the global trading system have in tackling what is one of the great policy challenges of the 21st century? We're very fortunate to have with us today two noted experts, Pangestu, Indonesia's Trade Minister, and Mark Halle, Director of Investment and Trade at the International Institute for Sustainable Development. Welcome to you both. Minister Pangestu, could we start with you, please?
Well, to answer your question, Keith, I think that both at the informal trade ministers meeting in Bali, at the sidelines of the UNFCCC conference in Bali, as well as in today's forum, we all agreed that if we wanted to achieve trade development and climate change objectives simultaneously, we first needed to have a multilateral consensus on the framework for climate change, both in terms of the targets as well as uniform pricing and framework for carbon. So I think the trading system will adjust to whatever the multilateral consensus that will emerge. If we don't get that multilateral consensus, we also all agreed that we run already the risks of what's happening in the trading system, where you have a number of responses that have come out in the name of reduced competitiveness because of having to meet higher energy efficiency standards or environmental standards, or in the name of reducing carbon footprint or carbon miles. We have seen the emergence of ideas of carbon tax, border restrictions, as well as standards, which may be inconsistent with the current multilateral trading rules and very costly for developing countries to meet. So we really need to have this multilateral consensus to begin with so that we can build the correct responses in the trading system.
Mark?
Thank you. It seems to me the context was set by the Director General at the forum when he said that trade openness has to serve sustainable development. In other words, what's done in the trading system has to contribute to reaching the goals that humanity has set for itself. So that there is an obvious link between what is done through trade liberalization and what is done to reach goals like the goal of climate change reduction. So it seems to me that we've moved very far over a very short period of time from an initial position where we felt we mustn't complicate an already complicated trade agenda by loading it with new considerations, to a position today where we realize that there are multiple links between the trade regime and the emerging climate change regime, and that we have to get it right. Now, what does it mean getting it right? Again, the Director General said you have to distinguish between what you can do in the trading system, what it's legal to do in the trading system, and what's desirable to do. Because it doesn't always follow that because you can do something in WTO, that that's the best route. So it seems to me we need to distinguish between the sorts of issues that relate to how WTO can help humanity reach the goals of the climate regime, what can be done in WTO, in the trading system, to facilitate the achievement of those goals, and then where the global community decides to use trade measures to try and implement some of those climate change arrangements, how can they best be designed so that they don't clash with the basic principles of WTO and the trading system? So it seems to me the challenge has been set out. There are various ways in which we can look at it, but I think that distinguishing between what we can do in the WTO to help advance the climate change agenda, and if we're going to try and take a more punitive approach, how do we design it so it doesn't clash with the trade rules, is really the basic agenda that we have to follow now.
Do the Doha negotiations, Minister, offer any potential solutions?
Well, it's not directly, but I think by having the Doha negotiations come to conclusion would add greater confidence to the multilateral trading system and put it in a position much better to respond to any challenges from whatever comes out from the multilateral agreement on climate change. And furthermore, I think that the danger of not concluding the Doha talks would be that we would have increased regional and bilateral agreements, which in itself has had an increased usage of environmental mandates in them, which will emerge. You could have emergence of increased environmental mandates in these agreements, which would end up being inconsistent with whatever is being discussed in the WTO trade and environment discussions, as well as what's happening in the multilateral trade, climate change discussions. So it would add to the greater complexity and inconsistencies that we are seeing. And I think we do need the Doha round to be concluded to increase, I think, the trust that we have in the system between developing and developed countries. Again, that the notion that both in the multilateral climate change discussions as well as in the multilateral trade talks, the notion that developed countries must take the lead in delivering the development mandate in both of those agendas. If we can have confidence that the DDA is concluded on that basis, I think we would also have greater confidence in pursuing the multilateral climate change framework.
Do you share that view, Mark?
I do. I think the Minister's right. I think it comes down to the issue of trust. The Doha Development Agenda was launched with the notion that we could correct some of the inequities built into earlier phases of trade liberalization and come up with a solution that would be genuinely favorable for developing countries. If that's not concluded, the suspicion is inevitably there that the richer countries are not prepared to make the concessions necessary to find a development-friendly outcome. And that means that that lack of trust, that suspicion, will spread throughout the multilateral system. We need a high level of trust to come up with the right package of measures to address climate change challenges. And if that basic trust is not there, if the developing countries feel that there is no real commitment to come up with a solution that genuinely benefits them, it'll be that much harder to reach agreement. It really does come down to a question of trust, and when it comes down to trust in the multilateral system, everything is connected.
So you see the onus of leadership being on the developed world then?
To take the lead, but of course we are no longer in the situation where the expectation is that everything will be done by the developed countries, developing countries don't do anything. I think we're already in a different world where developing countries are willing, able to engage constructively, but it's again in the multilateral climate change consensus, how do you translate the common but differentiated responsibilities and capacities into the different targets and different capacities, and how do you build that in? And in the DDA discussions, it's about special and differential treatment and less than reciprocal commitments. And that's at the crux of what we're talking about in the areas where we have had difficulties in coming to convergence. And we do feel that there has to be flexibilities on both sides, but there has still to be that balanced outcome that shows that developed countries are willing to take the lead to ensure that this is really a development outcome. But that, again, as representing developing country groupings, I think we have shown that we are able to engage constructively, and we hope that this can be pursued so that we have the commitment. I think at the end of the day, it's the political commitment to want to go that extra mile to make the extra commitment that is needed for us to get to the convergence that we need to get.
Mark Halle, final thoughts.
Well, the notion of common but differentiated responsibilities carries both words. Common responsibilities, there is no way we can come up with a solution to climate change, or to trade for that matter, without all countries making commitments. But they're differentiated, and even in the WTO now, one no longer talks about one size fits all, the same agreements and rules apply to everybody, because there's so many modulations that have now been introduced. So the question is, we need both. There are clear signs that developing countries, especially the leading emerging developing countries who make a big contribution to atmospheric carbon, are prepared both to take action nationally and to engage in a multilateral process. But they are looking for leadership from the rich countries. It is a clear truth that the current situation we find ourselves in was not largely created by the developing countries, and they want this gesture, this down payment, this real engagement to enable them then to step forward and join the game on a positive basis.
Minister, you have the last word.
Well, I think ironically, if we don't do anything on climate change, it will be developing countries and the poorest of the poorest which will be hurt the most. On the other hand, if we don't manage climate change properly, if we go ahead and set targets which are difficult for developing countries to meet, developing countries will also be the ones that may have to pay with lower growth or lower development. So I think developing countries have to be very proactive in making sure that their interests are being represented in both the climate change discussions as well as in the trade discussions. I think in the climate change discussions, translating common and a common but differentiated responsibilities and capacities must be with different targets, obviously, but it must be combined with capacity building as well as facilitation measures and incentives for developing countries to have the confidence to have in their national policies clear national climate change targets, but commensurate with their capacity, and have the confidence to also build their own capacity to meet the climate change objectives. On the trade front, developing countries need to also ensure that the emergence of these carbon taxes or the border measures that are going to emerge anyway needs to be addressed so that it's not going to lead to further blockage of trade or even disguised protectionism. And for that to happen, we must ensure that the sacred principles that underlie the multilateral trading system, which is transparency, non-discrimination, national treatment, and if you're going to use standards, that they must be scientific based and they must be rules based. These must be the ones that we must ensure underlie any emergence of these measures, and developing countries must be proactive on this front also.
Mari Pangestu, Mark Halle, many thanks to you both, and many thanks to you for watching WTO Forum.